he had a friend who was going to come and give a brief introduction. I think you probably all know Bob. So I'm just going to quickly share a few words from Aaron Cross, who gave editorial assistance on the book. And this is what he says. In essence, Bobby has always been a great storyteller. However, to translate his tales into a work of fiction is a grinding, slogging chore that is hard to accomplish. I couldn't be prouder for him, the poobah of produce, the sheik of the shelves, and the lord of lettuce. So Aaron is an editor and a novelist who has been friends with Bobby for over 50 years. And I'm sure he wished he could be with us this evening, but we'll thank him for sending his words. So without further ado, let's bring Bobby Driver up here.
My goodness, can you all hear me with this thing? I'm not used to wearing these, so bear with me. Thank you, Penny. Thank you for everyone that came. I'm really thrilled to see all these old friends. This is like a big fat reunion for me in a lot of ways. I'm bubbling over, I tell you. I would like to acknowledge some very important people that were involved in the making of this book. We've already mentioned Aaron, who was the copy editor. He's the guy that made sure all the M dashes were right and the periods were in the right place. He's a very precise editorial kind of guy that used to work for government publications. Then we also have Randy Jones here, who was my developmental editor. He's the one that, when I had flawed logic in my writing, he could see it and point it out, or just say, you don't want to say that. There are some things, there's a lot of unseemly stuff in the book, but there's some that was too unseemly, and he made sure it didn't get in there. So thank you, Randy, for being the governor of that issue. So others are Holly Heath Mullen, who is not here but lives in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. We were high school friends, and she is a historian, and she can dive through all the microfilm type stuff and everything online, and she gave me a lot of material. And last but not least, and probably the most important, is my wife, Trudy Cole, who did the layout, the cover, the illustrations that are inside, and she designed how the whole book operates. So it was a big job, and she nailed it. It's beautiful. So what I'm going to do, just so you know the layout of this evening, I'm going to talk about some of the backstory of how this book came about. And then it occurred to me after writing this book that about half the songs I've written, and even more that I perform, directly tie into events that happened to me during this period that this book was written. And so obviously I can't do all of them, I'm going to do about 5. So for about 20 minutes, I'm going to be playing songs that directly, and in some instances, like the tune Southern Roll, was written before the novel, but became the linchpin that got this novel going. You see, so the songs are important, and it's kind of weird to do them, but I'm gonna use about 20 minutes, and then we're gonna have a question and answer, because I'm sure if you've read the book, there's a lot of stuff that you want to know. Now, what I'm not going to tell you is people's real names. I can't do that in public, but if you want to talk privately, we might be able to ruin this a little bit, So that's kind of where we're going. So as far as the origins, I had friends that were in the literary field that had encouraged me for years to write a novel. And I knew how my brain worked, and I knew that I was not a novelist. It just wasn't in me. I was like I told him, I'm a songwriter, damn it. I'm not a novelist. It's too long. It takes too much structure. I can sit at the kitchen table and write a song in the morning and another one in the afternoon, but that's how I operate. But all of a sudden, the COVID hit, and I was sitting twiddling my thumbs, couldn't play music, couldn't do much of anything. So I gardened and I learned how to write. And I wrote a few short pieces that wound up in the Remembering Downtown, and people liked them. And even though they kind of were written in a naive, juvenile sort of way, it voiced the feel of what the north end of Harrisonburg was like back in, the 40s, 50s, and then when I came up, the 60s and 70s. And it was kind of a wild place, as you all probably remember. So my dad had a grocery store there, and my cousin David is operating director of operations. He's here tonight. So give Dave a hand. What do you say? I don't see any other former employees. If there are, I see a relative of Elizabeth Smucker, who was one of our bookkeepers. Gary, good to see you. And anyway, I worked at the Mick-or-Mack that was on Wolfe Street, and it was a very kind of loose and wild place. A lot of street bums, religious fanatics, people that were just out of their skull hanging around. And it really affected me as a youngster to be around this crowd. There was one man in particular, I can tell you, Zeke Balger. I don't know if you remember Zeke. Well, Zeke, I know he scared a lot of people, and I know he was mean as a hornet, but he was my grandfather, because I never had a grandfather. So he was in the book, and I loved him dearly, and I'm already choking up talking about it. So anyway, that was the scene I came up in. If you're wondering about the choice of the name Grocery Boy, when I started putting all these stories into a form, I wanted it to be like a boy's adventure story, like the old Hardy Boy novels. And, I wrote it in a very simple, direct, 8th grade style. And I remember as a kid, we used to watch cartoons like Astro Boy and Marine Boy. Well, this is Grocery Boy. so that's where that came. And another name was the name of the protagonist of the book. His name is Jameson Hardy, Jam for short. Now, that name was derived as a nod to the Hardy Boys, obviously. And also there was a media figure of the 20s, 30s, and 40s mainly. His name was Jameson Handy. And he did industrial and commercial photography and movie making for like GM, a couple other big corporations, but his General Motors stuff is legendary. And in the 50s, he invented the film strip, which we all grew up with, So Jameson Hardy Productions probably helped get us educated and learn about biology and, all the cool history stuff when the teacher would run those film strips. That's all produced by Jameson Handy. So that's kind of where the name came from. So we've talked a little bit about Mick-or-Mack. In the book, it's called Rock-a-Mack because I used the theme of rock. We have Rocktown. The bordering street was Rock Street. So I changed the name of the store to Rock-a-Mack. And that it's kind of odd, but throughout the book, there's hints talking about the bedrock that's underneath the locality we live in. Talk a little bit about the quarries up in the Gravels. I don't know if y'all in Rockingham County, there's an area called the Gravels, So I tried to use that as a theme of the book as well. So I changed a lot of names, except for public figures in the book. The musicians that I talk about were all real people. I didn't change the names of the musicians because they were public figures. There was occasionally people who had names that were so precisely perfect for what they were that I didn't, like Russell Carrier. He was a guy that bagged and carried out groceries. So Russell's name was retained. But in the rest of the book, I used local names for comedic effect. Like, we got the Maulheffers, and the Hornicks and the Holsingers and all these cool names that are just dying to be in a book. So for comedic effect, I used those local names and just mixed them around so that nobody got positively identified in the book, because I had learned if I did use people's names, I got some severe pushback from certain people, like, I'm gonna kill you if you don't take it off, that kind of thing. So, I was being in some friends of mine in the radio business wanted me to do a radio spot using these stories, and I learned real fast that I'd be in court for the rest of my life. And so that's why the names got changed. So I've talked about the theme of rocks, how we have a bedrock in our community. It's a solid, it's a religious community. It's an upstanding community. That's what we grew up in. But in the middle of that stability, there was all this instability, especially on the north end. So that kind of is a shifting mood of the book. Everybody talks about coming of age novels, and this could have been a coming of age novel. But the problem is, nobody grows up in this book. The adults are just the kings of bad behavior, playing horrific practical jokes on each other, a lot of drinking. And the boy, it gets exposed, on his delivery route and customers. He learns about some realities of life that kids that age weren't supposed to know. And so, the coming of age never, even though he learns about real life, he never grows up. And you'll see that when you read the book. But the protagonist also goes through a lot of personal disintegration. And this disintegration of his personality and his behaviors kind of parallels the disintegration of the downtown. If you lived in Harrisonburg, in the 80s and the 90s, what you saw was a town turn into a ghost town. They just stripped it bare. And I know I read an article in the Post in the mid-90s, and they had the travel guy go through the Shenandoah Valley, talk about what a beautiful place it was. When he got to Harrisonburg, he said he never did find the downtown. He just moved on. There was nothing to talk about. So that's addressed as well. Now, thankfully, things got better in the last 25 years. But also celebrate Northern Appalachian culture in this book. There's a lot of the old superstitions talked about in certain people, and a lot of the attitudes. And of course, in Rockingham counties, we got more Germanic. So with Germanic Appalachia, we get a little more occultism, a little more of the old wives' tales. I don't want to go into too many details here. But, and of course, the religious trends are mentioned, especially in chapter 3. It introduces, just what the religious background of this county was at that time. So those are some of the themes and the historical backgrounds. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start playing some songs that directly tied in some cases were, like I said, the inspiration for even writing this book. I guess I ought to turn this one off since I'll be working this mic. Can you hear this one? Okay, good. Well, anyway, when I was a kid, there were women that came into that store that were mean as a hornet, and they would threaten the baggers with bodily harm if their groceries got messed up. There was one old lady, and she was the meanest lady I've ever met in my life. And she would say stuff like, I'm going to stomp your guts out. Now, how many nice little old ladies will walk up to you and say she's going to stomp your guts out? So yeah. So here I was, a 13-year-old boy, listening to all these mean old women. And it gave me the inspiration for this song. It's oddly a love song. It's a song that Steve Parks and I recorded together back in the old days. It's called Southern Roll. Now, Southern Roll was a brand of margarine we carried. It was 4-pound cakes for $1. That was the cheapest grease in town. It was cheaper than lard. So everybody went in the store and got their dose of Southern Roll margarine. So that's the song. That's my baby strutting up the street, upsetting every man she meets. She's the best of all the rest. Yeah, that's my southern roll. She can shake it when she moves them legs. They got inflated with butter and eggs. She's a mess, but she's mine, I guess. That's my southern roll. She's a tree trunk, a shimmy, she wobble, and baby, she can't be beat. You ought to see my woman squabble when we play supermarket sweep. And back home at our love nest, boy, she's gonna knock me dead. Well, I go stone crazy when them big arms wiggle and she whacks me over the head. Yeah, that's my southern roll. Pretty mama satisfies my soul. She's the queen of the grocery store, and she is mine, all mine. Stretch pants with polka dots sets her little daddy running high. I'm gonna love her with all I got. That's my southern roll. Yeah, baby. We'll raise a football team of human span and buy a mobile home in Alabama. Take that brood, mama, raise them rude. That's my southern roll. And when mom and papa dead and gone, we'll have our little tribe to carry on. Raise them right till they learn to fight. That's my southern roll. She's a tree trunk, a shimmy, she wobble. Yeah, baby, she can't be beat. You ought to see my mama squabble when we play supermarket sweep. And back home at our love nest, man, she's gonna knock me dead. Oh, I go stone crazy when them she whacks me over the head. Yeah, that's my southern roll. Pretty mama satisfies my soul. She's the queen of the grocery store, and she is mine, all mine. Stretch pants with polka dots puts my little daddy running high. I'm gonna love her with all I got. That's my southern roll. Yeah, baby. Thank you. So anyway, that is very early on in the book, and my eyes can't focus. I'll just pull my script up here where I can see it. It's in chapter 1, page 10 through 11. So if you've read the book, that's where that song came from. Now, another thing, an issue that I overheard as a kid. Huh? Oh my God. Me and these wires never did work quite right. So she'll have to hook me up later, I guess. Okay, thank you. Anyway, I'll just leave it. Jeez, I'm falling apart up here already. Anyway, I'll just stick with this mic. I know it works because it's mine. um, but when I was a kid, I overheard a conversation at the store about these two guys saying, yeah, that girl keeps messing around like that, she's going to get sterilized. And I was like, totally wondering what the heck that could be. And it turns out, I learned later that there was a program in the state of Virginia, and I'm sure you all are very familiar with it, the eugenics program. and it unjustly did horrible things to children, and like sterilizations, incarceration, just keeping them locked up. And a lot of times it was totally undeserved. Like a kid would run away from home because he was getting abused. So he was an unruly kid. We got to sterilize that one. And just injustice after injustice, and kind of serious stuff. So anyway, fast forward around the mid '90s, I was songwriting like crazy, and this is one I wrote. It's called Lynchburg. Well, Mama and Daddy said, stay in your room. You cannot go out today, for there's a stranger that's coming here soon, perhaps to take you away. Now I've said my prayers and I've made my bed, done all the chores all around my homestead, and I can't believe that I'd done any wrong. I heard them whisper something about Lynchburg. I love the green fields of my old mountain home, but I'm not ready for this world alone. And I'm scared to death that they'll take me away to that school down in Lynchburg. Not really different than most kids my age. I love to read and I sure love to play. I feel the changes in my body so strange. I'll be a grown-up someday. Oh, I want to get married and raise a big family. There'll be 7 children, my sweet wife and me. But none of this can happen if they take me away to that school down in Lynchburg. I hear some footsteps on the creaky front porch. I feel the slam of the rusty screen door. I see in the sad eyes of the doctor and nurse that I'll be gone to Lynchburg. If this is for what happened in the dirty old shed, I pray to the Lord that he strikes me dead. And that long black car's come to take me away to that school down in Lynchburg. Yes, to that school down in Lynchburg. Anyway, moving forward in the book, there's a chapter called There's a Party in the Back Room. And that's kind of what it was. The stock room of that store, it was a running crew of everything from indigents to moochers to people that just wanted a shortcut to get into the store. Because a lot of people wanted to get their lunch at the delicatessen, which was in the back corner of the store, and they didn't want to go all the way around the store to come in the front door. So all these customers came in the back door. So it was running people all day and a lot of crazy stuff. Well, I guess I was in my early 20s by that time. I had already taken up songwriting, and this was one of the songs I wrote in the 1980s during that period. It's called Payday Whiskey. I'm going to cash my check at the whiskey shop. Buy a 5th baby load and bop till I drop with that payday whiskey. Payday whiskey. Oh, mama, payday whiskey, honey made a wreck out of me. Lord, the liquor hit my head like a sonic boom. Woke up the next morning in the ladies' powder room with that payday whiskey. Payday whiskey. Yeah, payday whiskey. Mama made a wreck out of me. Rent the door with the colors and a rolling pin. She said, Bobby, don't you let this happen again with that payday whiskey. Payday whiskey. Oh, mama, payday whiskey. A honey made a wreck out of me. She said, Lord, Bobby, Bobby, I thought you were dead. I said, baby, I wish you were instead. Well, that payday whiskey. Payday whiskey. Oh, mama, payday whiskey. A honey made a wreck out of me. So yeah, that fit the mood of my 1980s. If any of y'all worked at the Little Grill, you got probably a taste of that song more than you wanted. I think it opened stages and whatnot. Played it every night. There are several songs that I used extensively: Diddy Wah Diddy, She's Tough, and Mennonite Surf Party. And when my first wife passed away, on her grave, I swore I would never play those songs again because I was just so tired of it and so sick of it. And so far, I've managed not to play those songs and learn some new ones in the process. So, but yeah, Payday Whiskey was probably my theme song in that era of my life. So, in another part of the book, uh, you all remember the Campbell Hotel. I'm sure there's a music school downstairs, and then there was a flop house upstairs, and it was a lot of murders, a lot of things took place in that place. But what I remember from the store is all the bad checks that came out of there. People were always writing bad checks and then skipping town. Well, I wrote this song back way after the store had closed, sometime in the late 1990s. And this is a song I wrote that never has seen the light of day. For some reason, Steve Parks and we decided not to do it. We had enough songs. You know what I mean? You can only do so many songs. And I'd written a pile of tunes because I was on this songwriting binge where I worked at the hospital and I had this cake job where I could just sit and crib lyrics all day, standing there looking like I knew what I was doing, you know. But I was sitting there cribbing all these lyrics, and on my days off, I'd get them all together and get the guitar at the kitchen table, and I could write one song in the morning, one song in the afternoon on my days off. You see, so that was my process, and this is one of those songs. It's called A Little Further Down the Line. Don't you think it's time, sweet darling, we took it further down the line? I can't bear another day here. We have worn out our welcome here. Forget the past, let's leave this town behind. We haven't been to our jobs in 3 long weeks today. And the hotel says that we can't stay. I wrote some checks to the store, and they'll come back any day. So pack your clothes, let's make our getaway. Oh, the Rockies can be so pretty this time of the year. You know, Denver might be just our kind of time, but the gas in our car won't carry us 15 more miles. So run it dry and then we'll settle down. I promise things will be different when we finally land. And the drinking, no, won't be so out of hand. I'll bring you home the bacon like I did years ago when we lived in that house so big and grand. Darling, I'm still wondering about your present state of mind. That empty look, it breaks my heart to see. We couldn't take along another hungry mouth to feed. He's in good hands now, though we left him behind. Oh, I'm sorry for the broken dreams and how I wrecked your life. And I'm sorry for the day that I asked you to be my wife. Maybe we should step into the headlights of some train, just holding hands together in the rain. A preacher man that I knew, oh baby, 10 long years ago, lives just beyond the next town. We'll go to heaven, sweet darling, and we'll fall down on the ground and beg for mercy before our lives explode. Let's go back to where we were so long ago. Now, at the end of the book, the protagonist pretty much comes unglued. And that segues into the second novel that I'm working on. But this tune, I played this down at the Little Grill when Ron had it. And I think and Steve Parks and I played it briefly, but it was a little complicated for ensemble. And so we ended up shelving it when we changed bass players. The first bass player, he was cool with it. The other, we went on into other territories. But this song, I got to tell you, the thinking of how this song came about is very convoluted. Y'all know Reverend Billy Wirtz, I'm sure. Well, when Reverend Billy was a kid, he played a prank on this deeply religious family next door. The guy was a preacher, I think. And he told the younger boy that was living in the house that if he put this in the light socket, it would do something. I forget what. Well, all that happened was the kid got electrocuted and he kicked out all the fuses in the house, And so Billy's mom, as punishment, it was Christmas time, and Billy had asked Santa Claus for a Thinking Boy chemistry set. And his mother said, "You're not getting this year because a thinking boy would not do what you just did to that family." And so I got the idea of writing this song called The Thinking Boy. And you got the grocery boy and then the thinking boy, And so in the late 90s, I cooked this thing up. And also, one of my favorite musical figures is Webb Pierce. And Webb Pierce in the 50s was he was called the Wondering Boy because all of his songs had to do, wonder where my girlfriend is tonight, or just there stands the glass, I wonder where you are tonight. So anyway, I could imagine Webb Pierce doing this song on acid, it just because it breaks every good rule of songwriting. In country music, you're not supposed to use a bridge. That's your guarantee that your song won't get published or performed. So what I did is I wrote a chorus and then a series of bridges. So the song is just these bridges that take you from one room to the next, and it's quite interesting. But it's about somebody that thinks too much, and people close in my life know that I'm one of those people. So. I am the thinking boy, the ought to quit drinking boy, just chasing dresses and running wild. But when I think of you, it breaks my heart in two, 'cause making messes is easy for a thinking boy to do. I fumble through a magazine to occupy my mind, or flip on this old black and white. Good soaps are hard to find. It's not that hard to remember how you and I would cuddle up on this old couch and start to love. The blue room flickered like the neon night above. Open up your eyes, step outside through fields of roses. Lava flows beneath the ocean, and our age will come to an end before my mind starts its wandering once again. I'm lost without you, friend, and I stop and wonder, will this restless mind of mine keep reeling to the end of time? I am the thinking boy, the ought to quit drinking boy, just chasing dresses and running wild. But when I think of you, it breaks my heart in two, 'cause making messes is easy for a thinking boy to do. Thank you. And I got to mention as well that song. I was with Zeke Bogger on his dying day, and he was having visions of what was going to happen after. And he saw these. He said there was lakes of lava that were beneath the Atlantic Ocean, and there's all this, and that's what that last part of the song was about. It's about his last day. And in the book, and it's true. About 5 years later, maybe, I read a National Geographic or something, and they had discovered lakes of lava that were beneath Iceland. Go figure. So anyway, that's the last song, and that song kind of pulls us out of the book and into whatever happens next. And thank you for listening to this. But I thought this would be the best way to kind of get a few of the ideas of the book across. And now the fun part begins, where you all get to ask all kinds of crazy questions, and I'm game for anything. So are you going to pass a mic or yeah, okay. Andrea is going to hand out. I think I'd better stay with this one. Yeah, if it works. And I'll be honest, that's not the first time I've screwed up one of these mics. I must be just too used to a Shure
You didn't tell us that in the
SM58.
audition.
And yeah. So anyway, anybody have a comment? I mean, you can even reminisce about stuff. I mean, that's what we're here for, because I know there's a lot of Harrisonburg. Yeah, Colin.
Hang on. This way the people online can hear you.
Okay. So I'd like to reminisce about. Okay. Okay, there you go. Okay, the Czar of Zucchini and the Prince of Produce were two of my favorite monikers for your persona back in the day. And I don't know, there's no real comment other than those always rolled off the tongue very easily.
Thanks.
Thank you there, Bob.
And it's mentioned in the book as well. Oh yeah, about how I got teased with all these crazy names. Stuart Vining made up a bunch of them, and you guys, and Gino, I know he made up about half of them. Yeah.
Okay, Bob, of all the characters in the book, and maybe even your life, that's a lot. What's your favorite?
You know, on so many levels, there's all these. I'll just begin by saying that in the book, because the movement of humans through the store, we never got to know each other very deeply. A lot of these people that did all this outrageous stuff that's in the book, I never knew their last names. And sometimes I never even knew their first names, but we saw each other daily, and so there's not a lot of depth of character in the novel because I never learned people's depth. But I got to go back to Zeke Bogger every time. In the book, he's called Moses Logger. And you see, I didn't have grandparents except for I had a saintly grandmother. I had a Meemaw. I'm a real Southerner because my grandma was named Meemaw. And also I had an aunt named Willie. That makes me a double Southerner, And so anyway, Zeke took me as an early age, and he was the meanest man in Harrisonburg. He was a little man, but he was a born street fighter, and he could beat up anybody. And even when he was an old man, I'm sure he could kick somebody down. But he would pick me up and swing me around just like a sack of potatoes, and I loved it. My mother would get that old man off of you, and I was drawn to him like glue. And so he sat up in what we called the crow's nest, which was a part of the store where you could overlook everything. And my dad and Gary Pangle, they were always up in there. And I would sit on a stack of boxes or whatever. And Zeke would tell these fabulous tales from the 19th and early 20th century. And they're all in the book. But he had sixth sense, so he could conjure pretty good. And there's also a man that is in that same chapter who I never learned his name, but I still have his walking stick, which was probably used for evil purposes. I've had some occultists beg me for this cane. They want it bad, and I won't give it up. I'm scared to sell the thing. I'm scared it might. Anyway, it's all in the book. But No, this is a Ukrainian walking stick that I've needed for my bad leg. But I know the other cane supposedly had some kind of occult powers. Gary Pangle gave it to me because he was scared of it. but so Zeke and the Conjure Man, he's in there. They were guys that really fascinated me because they had a depth to them, and the history that they had. Zeke was a street hustler and probably didn't have much schooling, but he was hired by the federal judge, Paul, be the wheelman. Because he also was a moonshine runner, so he knew how to drive. And so he would be the wheelman for the Secret Service or whatever, FBI or whoever was trying to make these busts. And he would tell me these insane stories from the 30s about drug dealers and morphine addicts and, all these just, you didn't believe it happened back then, but it did. And so, like I said, there's a scene in the book where Zeke and he called my mother up and he says, I want Bobby. And my mother called me. I was living on Paul Street, and Mom said, Zeke needs you to pick him up. He wants a birthday party. And he was like, at this time, he was, I think, 93 or something. So I took him to my home, and he said, we don't need a lot. All I want is a hot dog and a bottle of House of Stewart Scotch. If you all know whiskey, that's the worst drink on the planet. So eating hot dogs and drinking this rot gut scotch, you can imagine what kind of time we had. But anyway, it's all in the book. It gets even better. I don't want to go into that. But he was the guy. My brother hated him. My brother despised him. But because I was always drawn to those mean old guys, because they were just fun to be around, So that I would have to say of all the characters, there's Zeke, and there's also my dad, because my dad exhibited patience beyond human capability. He could withstand the cussing out of the worst wino in town and just be nice to him and kind of nod, take it in stride. And he could listen to all these society ladies griping about this and that and the other, usually not justified, as David can attest. He had to put up with it too. And Dad was also a master psychologist. He could get right on your level. If he was talking to an illiterate psychopath, he could find a way to communicate with them. And he could communicate with the leaders of the town just as effectively. And so that's taken up in the book as well. So there's your two polar opposites. You got the wild end with Zeke, and you got stability. And Randy Jones made sure that I really focused on his kindness and his even-handedness and how he ran the store. That was one of the things that Randy was very careful that I kept intact. And there were scenes that kind of took away from that, and he asked me to get him out of there, So thanks, Randy. You made my dad look better in the book. The moral center, that's a good point. Because he was the guy that was stable in the midst of all these yahoos that are running around doing all this stuff. So any other questions? I see Rick Bowman.
Bobby, I was constantly wondering how many of these tales were true and how many you made up. Can you elaborate on the white go-go boots or the Big H shows?
Oh yeah. The Hoochie Coochie shows.
And were you Brad?
When I was, there's a scene in the book, and it's pretty racy about, I was 13, so I was in 8th grade PE one morning, cold Monday morning in PE class, and these boys had come in, and they had been to the strip show the night before. Every year there was one strip show in Harrisonburg, and somebody pulled some strings because it was raw, and it involved live sex and just all kinds of stuff. And what they would do, they let underage kids in there on purpose, and it was to abuse them on stage. They'd try to lure them close enough on stage, and they'd haul them up there and do all kinds of stuff to these boys. And so these boys came in, and they said, well, my brother, they made him do. I don't want to go into details because it's pretty rough stuff. But anyway, so it was all firsthand. I didn't go to these things. My mom and dad wouldn't let me out on Sunday nights. But these boys had gotten out and gotten in all kinds of trouble. Now, I fictionalized it by making them employees because I needed to tie it into the store. So that was fiction, but everything else was based in truth. Yeah. Now, the Go-Go Boots. There's a chapter that's based on the adventures of P.L. Kiger and Larry Dean, who I'm sure you guys, if you're from Harrisonburg, knew them as consummate bar musicians. They were some of the best that ever came around. Well, when they were teenagers, they would skip school on Friday and go to Myrtle Beach, drive down and play the clubs down there. And there's an episode with the Go-Go Boot that is true. I learned it from Billy Wirtz because he was a bandmate with them. And what I had to do was to elaborate. Now, in the continuation, they also got roped into the circuit of playing with a traveling preacher, and they got stiffed. And so I fictionalized that into the book. So everything in this book is true, based on truth. But what I had to do was reshuffle the narratives. So things take place at different times, or I might say, like there's in the teenage car wreck chapter or section, there was, instead of one hero of that story, there were really 3 stories that I merged into one person to make it a full story. So yeah, it's all true. I mean, I'm just kind of like I don't want to say a mannequin or a dummy, you know, like whatever, Charlie McCarthy, and you know. But I used every bit of my experience to make this book. But I knew I had to change names and I had to reshuffle the events to make it flow, you know. So that, yeah, it's true stuff. Just the names are different, and the order of the events have been altered and elaborated. I see Randy.
Hey, Bobby, great
Hey,
job, man. Quick question for you. Do you want to let any of us know what might be coming up in your second book, or are we going to keep that quiet for right now?
I'll tell you this much. The mental state of the protagonist descends to a place where, and Ron will love this, he becomes, the restaurant is called the Medium Grill. because it's there's some, and we all know the great lineage of medium grill dishwashers, and so that's what happens to Jameson in the next novel, and it begins with him in the dish room of the Medium Grill. Now the book, I've got most of the scenarios already sketched out, and very little is based in truth. There are certain people we knew at the grill that I merged into one character, like the adventurer. Guess who? But it's merged with another person, you see. And, you know, I'll tell you one of the funniest things he ever did is, and this will be in the book, is the adventurer who lived with me at the time. He lived in upstairs of my house, and I heard all this whomping and stomping and carrying on, and he was a big man. And he almost, you know, the chandeliers were rattling, and he comes down, he says, Bob, I got this CD, you're not going to believe it. It's just like the old time gospel that I used to listen to as a kid. It was Charlie Patton. I don't know if you're familiar with Charlie Patton, but he was a Native American / black / white man who was literally the sole founder of rock and roll music. But if you go back that far, so he's got this Charlie Patton record going. He's just going wild, and so that's going to be in the book. And Charlie Patton was like the human drum set. He could sing in a beat, and they always mic'd his feet in the recording studio. And this is back in the 1920s. And then he played this very elaborate guitar that was infectious, and he was the top musician in Mississippi. But anyway, so that shows that's going to be covered in the story. I'm going to deal with Melungeonism in the story as well, because I found out that some, not my family, but someone very close to me had a Melungeon heritage, and there's a story where in the book they all become Hawaiian musicians, and I had a cook one time. Mark, I can say this because Ron, you'll know this, Mark Pricer. And Mark came in real hungover one morning, and we started talking. He says, Well, I always wondered about country music. Like all that whiny guitar. Are those Hawaiians playing that stuff? And I said, Sure, Mark. I said, I said, yeah, country music owes a lot to our Hawaiian heritage. I said, up in the mountains, there's a family of the McIntyres. And what I was alluding to, Laney McIntyre, and he was a big Hawaiian star back in the 30s. And I said, yeah, the McIntyres revolutionized country music because they brought their heritage to the hills. I said, and you know, you've heard, because, you know, back in Brock's Gap, a couple agents back in the 30s disappeared. A couple state troopers had disappeared during moonshine raids where they had been killed and buried up in the mountains, and those graves are still up there. But I told Mark that, yeah, man, I said, they scragged a bunch of state troopers and T-men, and they're protecting their marijuana plots up there because, you know, Hawaiians back there were known for their growing of marijuana. And so he's still loving it. He's eating it all up, you know. And I said, and their influence can be seen to this day. Witness the ham plate at the L&S Diner. What do you see on top of that slab of ham? A pineapple. And he says, are you teasing me? So yeah, we'll have some stuff like that. And there's a little romantic interest, but enough of that. Is there any more questions? Yeah, Merle. How you doing, buddy?
So what amazed me was the level of recall you had about all of this. So how long did it take you to write the book? And did you write any of this down a long time ago? Or did you just start writing 2 years ago and one thing led to another? How did it come about?
I just started spitting out my memories. I started in 2020 because I got bored on Fridays. That seemed to be my worst day of the pandemic because usually Friday you're out running around, you're doing something. You know, Trudy would like to go out to eat, or I don't know. Tell me what was it like in the first? Yeah, well, it was because I had health issues that prevented me from doing much of anything. So anyway, on Friday nights I started spending about 2 hours just writing these little vignettes of local characters, and people liked it. And Lynn Rasmussen, who I was raised with down the street, she was like, I want a book, you know, and a couple other people said they wanted books. And so I said, well, hell, I ain't got nothing else to do. And literally it was the public that nudged me in, and then like Randy and Tim Henderson kind of pushed, because they were very literary guys, kind of nudged me in that direction. So I got a Strunk and White, you know, because here's the thing about men and women, and this is something I was told years ago, is that men as they age lose all of their language skills unless they hone them daily. Like if you're an English teacher, if you work in the arts, you know, literal arts, you'll be fine. But if you're a guy like me, you know, I was pretty poetic because I was writing song lyrics, but I had no concept of how to spell, how to syntax, you know, all that stuff had just fallen off my brain. And that's natural. Men are like that, but they remember how to add, subtract, work numbers. And so I was, you know, like David had me as an accounting clerk, even though I was worthless. You know, stuff like that. And that's just the way a man's mind, but a woman's mind seems to retain all of those writing skills and communicating, you know, communication skills go with men as they age, unless they work at it. So I had to relearn all this stuff. And, you know, thank God for spell check, you know. So that was the writing process for me. It was all from memory. And as far as how long it took to write, I would say it was a 4-year period from writing these little stories to getting the book and looking at it. But in that time, I probably only had fingered a typewriter maybe 18 months where I was thinking and writing. The rest of the time it was in the hands of others because they had to do their thing with it. So it's a process. If I had have not self-published and gone to a publisher, we wouldn't be standing here having this little party tonight, because I knew that I would, one, probably not get published to begin with, but literary agents is a 3-year wait just to get it in the hands of somebody that'll show it to a publisher. So I just couldn't do that. I had to just go ahead and do it. So that's how it worked. Merle, thanks for the question. You gotta ask my boss.
The question was,
she did
will
the
there be a
layout
large
and-
print version?
Yeah, well, we had to squeeze 90,000 words under 200 pages, or else the cost of the book would have. Isn't that true? Trudy, you want to get up here? You want to address it because I. But we did try to squeeze that amount of text under 200 pages, which meant small print. If we go big print, the cost of the book, well, you've seen big print, but the format is always larger. So I don't know if it's going to happen or not. Now, we are going to stick the thing eventually, probably wind up on an Amazon Kindle type thing. I don't think we'll ever have an audiobook unless AI comes up with some way to make it talk. I don't know. But we've had people ask for an audiobook already.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's always great when you have a speaker that has a fan club, and you definitely do. And really, I guess this is now your era's tour. But we've got to, I think next time, if you do this again, make sure that everybody knows this guy can provide music, storytelling, history, and comedy. So I feel like we had like several shows tonight. So thank you so much. This is really amazing. And thank you all for coming and for buying the books. As I mentioned, there's some CDs up here, and I'm sure that we're willing to stick around a little bit so that you can visit. I'm sure everybody's going to want to say hi.
I'm here to sign books tonight as well. So if you got books you want me to scribble on, I'm glad to do it. Are you selling books? Yes.
Yes.
On sale online, I believe.
Yep. We have books Andrea's been selling already. So thank you for coming. Enjoy your evenings. Happy holidays. And we'll see you next year. You're welcome.
Most of the piece of the mic. This